My name is Michael Haas. I run a little big team of investor agents called House Hack Seattle. I've been doing this for a little while, and in the process of doing this, I've learned a lot. One of the things that I love about my job as a real estate agent is that when I get kicked in the teeth on a deal or on an issue or on a surprise, I can treat it as a learning lesson because me and the team do this at scale every day, day in and day out. And rather than it being a sunk cost, a loss for me, I think of it as an investment in my future deals, in my clients' deals, and everything else. So I'm going to try and share a little bit about my first 3 rentals. I'm going to try and share a little bit about scaling. I'm going to try and share a little bit about my losses as well, because I think that realistically, especially in this market, we have to be honest that in real estate, you don't always make money. At least off Instagram, you don't always make money. And then I'm going to open it up for questions. And I would love to hear where people are at. I'd love to hear your questions. I would love to give the best advice I can. And then, of course, if it goes deeper or if you're not comfortable sharing the specific scenario, I'll put my contact info up on the end. Always feel free to call me, text me, email me. Real estate is one of my few loves. So you're not imposing when you ask me questions. So like I mentioned, my name is Michael Haas. I have been doing this for about 10 years, investing in real estate. And I kind of fell into it by accident. I got started straight out of college at 21, newly married, realizing that the cost to rent in Tacoma or Seattle is actually not that different than the cost to buy. And this was in 2013. A lot has changed since then. It's not the same market, but that's how I got started. I fell into real estate investing as a way to try and get out of renting and try and build a little bit of equity at a time when me and my wife, Jess, had a great job, but absolutely no income. Well, absolutely no wealth, right? We were very optimistic. In 2013, there was not the same resources that there are today. House hacking, which you may have heard from an investor named Brandon Turner at Bigger Pockets. Back in 2013, Brandon Turner was just getting started at Bigger Pockets with the podcast, and he started coining the word house hack right around that time. So when I looked at the rent, when I looked at the cost to purchase, and when me and my wife, Jess, decided to hit up some family members, get a co-signer, and do that crazy thing, buy your first house, I didn't really know what to tell my real estate agent. So what I told her was that I want a house with a lot of bedrooms, and I want it to be kind of a turd. And kind of a turd was important, right? I didn't want it to be a total turd. I didn't actually have money to fix that turd before I moved in, but I wanted it to be kind of a turd. Nowadays, we would call that a conventional house hack with some value add, or a cosmetic house hack, right? So it's incredible. It's a lot harder to invest in real estate now than it was in 2013, but I will say that the understanding of what you can do, the education that's out there, and the opportunities, especially in Seattle, are just night and day better, which is pretty incredible to see. So when I got started, I didn't know a lot, but I bought this little house in Ravenna. I moved in, I rented it out to my college buddies. I wrote up a lease in Microsoft Word. There was the internet back then. Granted, I didn't even Google it. I just wrote up a lease. I moved my buddies in and I started making income. A lot changed pretty quickly. And one of the things that changed is that my wife's family back in California had a big surprise happen. Her dad was healthy, a marathon runner, no signs of any issues. And out of nowhere, he had a heart attack and dropped dead. Nowhere. No one had any idea. That changed our plans a little bit. That would change anyone's plans a little bit. We already were house hacking and real estate investing, but we started to realize that the why we were doing it for was a little bit complicated. It was a little bit more complicated than just trying to save a little bit of money on our mortgage. So we dropped everything. We sold our house. In retrospect, probably a mistake. This was 2014, 2015. There's been a pretty big run up since then, but that's okay. We sold our house. We moved back to California. And we built a tiny house on wheels. And we lived in it. And we got chickens. And I traded manual labor, 10 hours a month, for utilities. So it was free. Just had to pay for the tiny house. Parking spot was free. I thought I was pretty smart. I thought I was really smart. We thought we had made it. I was making 40 grand a year and I had like no expenses. My wife, who is both smarter and more qualified than I am, was making 60 grand a year. We were really happy with our situation. We didn't know that much about investing at that time. This is a great example of why networking with people that are farther down the road than you is so helpful. We had no concept that there could be a better route to building wealth than working our 40 grand and 60 grand jobs and living in a cute trailer. Let's be honest, still a trailer, cute trailer. We didn't have an example to fall on, so that's what we did. To our benefit, when we did move back to Seattle, after Jess's mom got back on her feet, moved in with her brother, and things started to return to normal for her family. When we moved back to Seattle, we were smart enough to do that introspection of looking back at our decisions to sell the house, to purchase a tiny house, to take our low-paying jobs in rural California, to get all that started and see where it brought us financially. And spoiler alert, it didn't get us that far ahead. And I think if you don't own rental properties, if you don't own real estate, I think that's the experience that a lot of us are having. We save money, we work hard, and at the end of the day, when we actually look at our finances, it doesn't feel like we're that far ahead. That's where we were. I'm curious where everyone else is. So, how many people have purchased 0 investment properties? And I'm talking like a flip or a house hack or a rental or an Airbnb, not a primary residence. How many people have purchased no investment properties so far? Oh. How many people have not yet purchased an investment property? Yeah. Okay, how many people have purchased 1 to 2 investment properties? Cool. How many people have purchased 3 or more investment properties? This is like actually almost an even split, which I'm pretty excited about because I'm going to talk to all 3 of those scenarios. And I'm going to talk about how I bought my first 3 investment properties and then also what I would do differently today if I was in your shoes. So, if you know me, you know that I really like this tool called the Millionaires list. Essentially, you do the thought experiment where if you won the lottery and you had millions of dollars, what would you buy? And you write it all down. And then along the side, you write down how much those things cost. I'd buy a boat. Might be like 80, 100 grand. I don't actually know how much boats cost. Probably more now. I would do a all expense paid trip to Fiji with all my family. You write all that down and you total up what it actually cost. And a lot of people are surprised that although it's a lot of money, it's not like a lotto jackpot amount of money. Same with time, right? We all have really limited time. We all have all these goals and dreams and things that we want to do. And we all feel like that time is slowly passing us by. And I feel it particularly because of losses in our family, like my wife's dad. And you have these dreams, and it always feels like it's not quite something that you can do. So write them all down. I want to spend a year abroad in France with my family. I want to circumnavigate the world in a sailboat. I want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, right? You write them all down, and then you write out how long each of those things would take. 8 months for the PCT, 2 months to get around the world, a year in France, and you total it up. And one of the reasons I love this experiment is that we as humans love to make excuses, but when we actually look at how much money we have and how much money we need, we look at how much time we have and how much time we need, there aren't that many excuses. A lot of us can live our dream life if we actually take the actions to live it. So I love that experiment. When we moved back to Seattle, me and my wife did that experiment, and we found out that we needed 10 rental properties to live, within our means and do all the adventures we wanted to do in our family. So we started doing it. This is number 1, right here. We name all our rentals. This one was called Moneycat because there's coins all over the house, like quarters, pennies, nickels, dimes. I think the previous owners played some kind of game where they threw them at each other because they were in the weirdest places, guys. They were not like, oh, it's in the couch cushion, because obviously they left the couch. It was everywhere. Crawl space, attic, corners, definitely a lot in the HVAC. So we bought this house and we started renovating it. It is a 4,000 square foot house in North Beacon Hill. At the time, YouTube was definitely a good resource. I did a lot of the demo. I did some of the plumbing. I did a lot of the work involved in the house. We would have gotten the whole 4,000 square foot house renovated for 30 grand. But the sewer line collapsed, so that cost us 14 to fix, so we ended up at 44. That would be really difficult to do today with the cost of materials, the cost of labor. This was in 2016. But I mention that because based on your situation, you may have to get your hands a little bit dirty to get started in this business. Like I mentioned, me and my wife made a little bit of money, but not a lot. So we had to figure out a way to get started. Fast forward to today, we do have those 10 rentals, plus our primary residence in Samammish. We are really passionate about investing in the Seattle Metro. So you can see, we own a ton in North Beacon Hill. We have some down in Burien, Des Moines. We have some up in Wallingford. We have a glamping site on 7 acres up on Stevens Pass with a yurt and a tiny house and some other cool stuff. And it took us 10 years to get there. That's a great example of when you actually write everything down, it taking a lot less time than you realize. So we bought a property every year for 10 years and got here. And at the moment that we bought that first property, we knew that we wanted 10. That was about all we knew. We didn't know how we were going to get 10. We didn't know how to manage rental properties. We didn't know how to renovate rental properties. We didn't know how to finance rental properties. We didn't know much, but we knew we wanted 10. And one of the interesting things about setting an intention is that you don't actually need to know all the steps to get there, right? You need to know where you're going, and you need to have the humility to ask others how to get there and the wisdom to figure it out based on what they tell you, but you don't need to know every step of the process. So I love this quote from MLK, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the full staircase." That's been my experience in real estate investing. I'm gonna walk through my first 3 deals and talk about what I did and talk about what I would do if I was in your shoes. But know that I do not, at the moment that I bought those first 3, I did not have the clarity that I have today. In hindsight, you can kind of chart the path that you took and make it all seem intentional. And that can be discouraging if you're just getting started, not knowing what you're doing. In reality, I also had no idea what I was doing, and I figured it out. So don't take this clean presentation as an indication that you need to have it all figured out either. There are 2 very different paths into real estate investing, though. I know what we should all try not to do, so we can start there. We shouldn't buy our primary residence, live the American dream, spend between 95 and 110% of what our family earns, put the rest on credit cards, and hope that Social Security will save us. We all know that the American dream looks a little different now than it did when our parents and our grandparents were buying their first home. It's a little bit more expensive. The social safety nets that they had aren't as strong as they used to be. The economy is not as certain. So the American dream, I think, looks a little different. And I think if you're not willing to make the sacrifices involved in not spending 105% of your paycheck, in not necessarily living in your dream home if it doesn't help you reach your other goals, there's not a lot I can do to help you. I'll be brutally honest. This is not easy. There are sacrifices that have to be made. You can choose what your sacrifices are, but you don't get by with no sacrifice. Anyone that's telling you different is probably trying to sell you something. So, on this side, we've got hustle. If you're like me, when I got started, and you're young, you're scrappy, you're willing to make sacrifices, you're willing to get your hands dirty, you're willing to go on YouTube and burn your house down, you have the ability to get started. On this side, we have savings. If you are able to live within your means, whether you have a meager paycheck or a massive paycheck, and you're able to sock money away every single month, there's a lot of opportunity for you to invest. And the opportunities increase the larger the delta between what you make and what you spend becomes. So you don't need both of them, right? If you have both of them, it's great. That opens up more opportunities. But you do need one of them. And the first purchase that you should make might look a little bit different depending on what your situation is. So if you're on the hustle side of the equation, my recommendation would be to consider what I did. House hacking looks a lot different today than it did back in 2013 when I bought my first house, or when it did in 2016 when I bought my second, but it's still a viable strategy. And it was a viable strategy before Brandon Turner put a name to it. It just got a little cooler once Brandon Turner put a name to it. The reason that house hacking is so powerful is that if you're able to get into an asset for 0% if you served in the military, 3% if you're a first-time home buyer, 5%, you can get started without a lot of cash, and you can control the value of that asset through your labor. That's something that people miss oftentimes when they look at real estate investing. A lot of people like to look at the values of homes over time, and they look at the rent. And maybe you're fortunate. Maybe you're like me, and you're an entrepreneur, and you can just work harder to make more money. That's a great position to be in. Like, I love entrepreneurship. I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurship specifically for that reason. But I know a lot of people in the room are not. And the reality of W-2 work is that if you work harder, if you get smarter, if you get better, you will probably see some return on that investment, but it probably won't be immediate. And it may not come at all, depending on the organization that you're in. And real estate investing gives you an avenue where your efforts are returned with rewards. And I think to be successful in today's day and age, we all need an avenue where we can put in effort and get a reward. So real estate investing is a great way to do that. That's if you're on the scrappy side of the equation. If you are a little bit wealthier, whether because you are older and have had time to invest, whether through good fortune from family members, inheritance, etc., whether through an amazing job and just great income, you have a few more options available to you. My first purchase would be a cash cow rental. A lot of people are excited with DADUs right now. I am too. Like, we spend a ton of time talking about DADUs, and I don't want you to think that it's not an opportunity. But I do want to call out that the reason that I'm here where I am today is because I held on to as many of my properties as possible, and I didn't just make income, I built wealth. And at 6%, 7% interest, with hard money loans or private money loans, construction loans to build these DADU projects, with rents stagnant where they are, it's really hard, guys. It's really hard to build 1, 2, 3, 4 houses and keep them all. And you'll make money, don't get me wrong, you'll make money. But especially if you're getting started, money is great, but assets are better. So figuring out a way to hold on to an asset would be my priority, not just make income. So that'd be a cash cow rental. Now, what's a cash cow rental? It's probably a rental that isn't perfect. I'll be honest, a lot of my houses are tough to finance. They've got, interesting zoning. I own a house that's actually a single family residence that had a crane bring a manufactured home to it and drop it on top to make it a duplex. Banks don't know what to do with that. The seller didn't know what to do with that. I bought that house for $300 and something thousand, and it rents great. And that's not the only weird one I have. I have a lot of weird houses. And the reality is that a lot of people get tied up with value. They get really wrapped up in what's the ARV on this property? What is it worth? Am I getting a good deal? And don't get me wrong, guys, value matters, but the reality is that if you're holding this property as a rental and you're aware of the benefits of holding on to rentals forever until you, God bless, pass away and will them to your family or your kids, you'll realize that value matters, but it doesn't matter that much. In the grand scheme of things, cash flow is what matters. So if you can buy something that is cheap because the value is hurt, but the rents are not, I think you should buy it, especially if it's an early purchase. And I think you should hold on to it until you die. So that's the cash cow rental.
Could you elaborate on what you mean by early purchase?
Early purchase, yes. So real estate is expensive to transact. That is one of the key disadvantages of real estate over, say, stocks or bonds or crypto, is that it's expensive to transact. So the longer you can hold on to an asset without transacting, the more your returns can compound. If you purchase something in your very old age with the plan of, selling it to retire, it doesn't mean it's a bad investment. It just means that some of the value of that investment is going to get eaten up by transaction costs. So that's why, although it may not be the best use of your equity to buy one property and hold on to it forever, it does generate the most cash flow because you're taking advantage of low transaction costs and increases in rents over time. A great example of that is that Moneycat house that I mentioned. It's not a great house. It's a little weird. It's got kind of a basement. It was run as an illegal daycare when I bought it, so it's kind of a confusing layout. But it's 8 bedrooms and it's walking distance to the light rail. So it rents and it rents great. And I've cash flowed between $1,000 and now $2,000 a month on it for the last decade. And if I sold it, I probably would get less than if it was a more traditional house in that location. But if I sold it, I would be absolutely crazy, guys. I don't know why anyone would sell this asset. This is a great asset. So at some point you need to make sacrifices, right? Like my point earlier. And one of the sacrifices you may have to make is sacrificing resale value for the benefit of cash flow. And I think it's worth making. And one of the common elements on both of those strategies is that they are going to take a little bit of time, right? If you're house hacking, it'll be the actual time that you spend figuring out how to lease out these units, having roommates, doing renovations. If you're investing, it might not be the actual time you invest in the property, but it is the time that you wait, right? No one buys a rental and sells it a year later and crushes it with no value add. Maybe a little bit in 2020, but for the most part, that's an abnormality. You buy a rental and you hold on to it and you take advantage of time to compound those returns. So the time is the common element there. And after you buy your first house, hopefully the experience is positive, right? I talk to a lot of people that struggle with real estate based on one bad experience. And the reality is that all of us are going to have bad experiences in real estate. It's inevitable. We're going to have evictions. We're going to have burst pipes. It comes with the territory. But if you stick with it and you buy your second one, it starts to open up some interesting possibilities. If you're on this side of the equation, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. If you're scrappy, you should house hack again. And you should house hack again as quickly as you possibly can. And I'll be honest, it may be a little bit disruptive to your lifestyle. My wife jokes that once we hang photos in our house, like pictures, we should probably hire a moving company because we're about to move to a new house hack. And that can be tough. But the reality is that if you can have a high velocity, especially earlier on in your life, you can accelerate this process pretty significantly. So I would do another house hack if you're still in the scrappy camp. If you're in the less scrappy camp, you have a little bit of a decision in front of you. You could do another cash flow rental. You could do a flip. You could do a house hack. Just because you have money doesn't mean that you can't house hack. But I think one of the best opportunities, especially if you're married, is to consider trying to start playing the tax game. And a lot of you have heard about bonus depreciation. You've heard about the short-term rental loophole, where if you materially participate in your short-term rental, you can take passive losses from your real estate portfolio against your active income. If you are a high wealth individual, chances are you also have a high income. And the games that you should be playing look a little bit different because it's a lot better to save $1 than to make $1, because making dollars gets taxed. You don't get taxed on your savings. So I'm a big fan of the short-term rental loophole. I'm a little bit fortunate. I work in real estate, so I'm a materially participating professional either way. But for a lot of you that are making, tech money, knock on wood, I know it's a little rough out there right now for the tech folks. A lot of you that are making tech money, a little bit of tax savings can go quite a bit farther than just another stock investment or another rental investment. So if you're not familiar with that process, talk to your CPA, talk to an agent, talk it through. It does take time. You can't cheat the system and materially participate without materially participating. But especially if you're in a situation where you're in a partnership and one of you works full-time and one of you works part-time, it can be a really good loophole to take advantage of. And any questions about short-term rentals, I guess, before I jump through that?
Those are all legal loopholes, right?
All legal loopholes. The illegal part would be if you don't spend, 100 hours on your short-term rental in a tax year and you say that you do. Obviously, that would not be acceptable. But assuming that you follow the rules for material participation, essentially it makes your rental a business, and it allows you to take those deductions, which are depreciation, all the benefits of holding rental properties, against your active income, your W-2 income, which is a huge, huge benefit. And that's because one of the hugest benefits that gets overlooked in real estate is just the difference between what you make and what you keep, which is one of the reasons why I've continued to harp on rental properties despite us going to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% interest rate, is because as valuable as flipping real estate is, as valuable as investing is, the top line number is deceiving, right? If you're flipping properties, if you're not holding them for a year and you're not doing anything too fancy with it, you're paying your income tax rate on that flip. If you're holding rentals, you're probably paying capital gains tax rates or no tax at all when you sell them, and you're getting all those tax benefits. So if you're holding rentals and you're doing it right, chances are you're not really paying much or really any tax on your rental income, which is pretty incredible. So we always focus on what you keep, not what you make. I know that I'm a real estate agent, so that means that our entire industry is obsessed with that top line number, how many things they sold, how much GCI commission they made. So it can be a little bit of an ego exercise to step it back and not try and impress your friends with those big numbers and just focus on money in your pocket. But it's an exercise worth doing. Finally, we'll get to the DADU. So for the third purchase, I would purchase a DADU play. And if you're not familiar with what a DADU is, it's a detached accessory dwelling unit. It is essentially a small home. Used to be 1,000 square feet, now potentially 1,200 or 1,500 or even more in your backyard. And the reason that I would make that my third purchase is that for a good real estate investor, the lines between scrappy and just getting started and established with wealth, they start to blur eventually. And that's the cool part about house hacking. Assuming you do it right, and assuming you cash flow your properties, and assuming you live below your means, and assuming real estate goes up in value, which it usually does, at some point, you're gonna wake up and realize that you're a little bit wealthy. And you have opportunities open to you, like the DADU opportunity, that maybe weren't available to you in the first purchase. And the reason that I would jump to this now on property number 3 is just risk. The reality is that for everyone in this room, the best way to make money in real estate or just in your life is not to lose money, right? And the best way to have a really good return on your investment is to hold it for a really long time. So when we're purchasing investment properties, when we're working in real estate, you definitely want to make money, don't get me wrong, but your primary goal should be not losing money and then also not getting yourself kicked out of the game. I know a lot of investors that were crushing it in 5, 6, 7, and then they just got hammered in the financial crisis. And a lot of them couldn't get back in because of bankruptcy or other issues until 2019, 2020. They missed a lot of the run up. So a lot of our goals as investors really should be keeping in the game, not just hitting these big wins that everyone sees on social media, but making sure that as many of your deals as possible make money and that you stay solvent. I mostly did this, right? To talk to my personal portfolio, I mostly did this. The very first purchase I made was a house hack. The second purchase I made was a short-term rental off Outguy. The third purchase I made was a DADU play. That said, it's not the only path that works for you. I'd love to hear a little bit about people's personal experience. I'd love to answer your questions. So the floor is yours, guys. What do you want to talk about? Any questions?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on how the DADU and the risk aspect? You mentioned that DADU can help minimize risk.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, or rather that the bigger the project, the higher the risk, right? So I was fortunate in that when I started doing big, hairy renovations, the market was going up, right? So, and debt was relatively affordable, right? In a market where prices are going up and debt is affordable, mistakes don't hurt as badly as they do in a market where prices are flat or they're going down and debt isn't expensive. And that's because most mistakes in real estate are mistakes of time or mistakes of money, right? You made a mistake and now you have to redo your work. You made a mistake and you didn't line things up right and now you're delayed, right? So if you can minimize the impact of time and money mistakes, a lot of these projects go a lot better. But also, if spending more time on a project doesn't result in a higher sale price because of appreciation, and spending more time on a project results in a lot of holding costs, those mistakes can get increasingly expensive. So the goal with the DADU play is to tackle a really big project that has a lot of wealth creating ability when you have a little bit of a portfolio and assets to soften the blow of any mistakes. A lot of people that get started early with the DADU opportunity can do well, but if you don't, it goes back to that point about getting knocked out of the game. We see a lot of listings now where they're halfway renovated and they have permits and they're dumping them, right? Because the investor got in over their head.
So how do you evaluate or look for which the DADU or the benefit or the property developer do?
Yeah, good question. So as he said, how do you look for a DADU opportunity? The process of looking for a development opportunity is pretty much the same as looking for any investment opportunity, right? You're looking, if you're holding it at the rental income versus the mortgage or holding costs, and you're looking at if you're flipping it at the after renovation or after build value versus the after build value versus the build cost. With DADUs, it just gets a little bit more complicated because it takes longer and the budget is larger. So a good rule of thumb, and the reason that a lot of people in this room, myself included, really love DADUs, is that the typical advice for rental properties is to buy in less desirable neighborhoods because the A-plus neighborhoods often don't cash flow that well. Yeah, the properties cost a lot more and yeah, the rents are higher, but they're not that much higher. Whereas in the, far south Seattle neighborhoods, the properties are cheaper and the rents are lower, but they're not that much lower. So the ratios are a little bit better. That rule kind of goes out the window with DADUs because you're getting additional units on the lot and the build cost is going to be the exact same within reason, whether those additional units are in Wallingford or whether they're in Rainier Beach, right? So your delta between what you spend on it and what it's worth and what you spend on it and what you can get for rent can be a lot larger in those nice neighborhoods than the less nice neighborhoods. So that's what I look for first, right? Is this a neighborhood where the value is high? Typically for DADUs, you want to sell over 700,000. And is this a neighborhood where there's spread there? And then logistically speaking, we're looking for access, we're looking for lot size, we're looking for lack of environmentally critical areas, which can impact your development. So we have a little bit of a checklist that we go through. But I'd say the biggest thing that I run into with new investors isn't so much the feasibility bit, it's the value bit. So a lot of people will send me these like big lots in like Des Moines or Tukwila. And they're like, could I be able to have DADU here? And of course you can. But if houses in that area are selling for 500,000 and it's going to cost you, $350 to build this and it's going to decrease the value of your house, like, are you actually making that much money building it? And oftentimes the answer is no. Yeah, Luis.
So it's really cool to have 10 properties in the area, and I'm wondering, do you personally manage them, or did you get to a property count where you said, I still want to, work full time, I don't want to, show potential tenants around every time there's a new renter that might want to move in? And like, what was that count where you realized if you do have management, that it'd be helpful for you?
The moment I hired management, the moment I decided I needed to hire management, I was in a kayak with my wife and our 2 cousins in Hawaii. And it was her birthday. And we were having a great time. And then her phone rang and she picked it up. Never pick up your phone. That's the solution to this problem. Just let it go to voicemail. She picked it up and the tenant was saying, "Oh my gosh, Jess, there's water everywhere. There's water everywhere. There's water everywhere." She's like, "Where's the water coming from?" "I don't know. There's just water everywhere." And you can imagine that birthday kind of got ruined, right? Like you can bounce back from those things, but we're human. And like when things stress us out, it takes a while for us to recalibrate. And things are always going to stress you out. But if you can outsource things that stress you out, you'll be a happier human. So that was the moment that we decided like we needed to hire property management. Full disclosure, we had 6 properties at that time. So I'm a big fan of property management, don't get me wrong, but I also want to be realistic. Like if you're buying on razor thin margins, like a lot of people are buying right now just because of the reality of the market is, you might have to do it yourself for a bit. And I will say also that I'm a better client for my property manager because I did do it myself for a little bit. So I kind of get how the business works and I'm not, going to string them out for stuff that's just the reality. Yeah, good question.
Do you have recommendations on getting experience before like committing to your first house hack, first investment?
Oh, good question. One of the things we really like is case studies. So usually I put actual numbers on the screen and talk through them. We didn't do that today because today was hectic and I didn't have time to put them up. Sorry. But it's really helpful to look at case studies and try and find people, either colleagues or agents that have successfully house hacked or have helped people successfully house hack and kind of understand what the patterns are. Because a lot of real estate investing is pattern recognition and finding something that works for you and repeating it. And obviously, if you can get information from other people on what works and what doesn't, it can be a little bit faster. So I'd say doing that. Also just not getting out over your skis, right? Like if you want a house hack for the first time and you're looking at like 1.3 million in Bellevue, like that can be a good house hack, but it sounds like a riskier one than, something a little bit more reasonable. Yeah.
I guess following up, if anybody needs a hand, come and say hi.
Yeah. That's the other thing. Like if you just want to help somebody out with their project, like I have had tenants house hack because they saw what I was doing. I've had friends house hack because they helped me swing a hammer at my projects. Like people are always looking for a little bit of help and it can be really helpful to chip in your labor for a beer and a little bit of knowledge. Yeah.
Hi, Michael and James. A couple of questions about short-term rentals. Yeah, definitely interested in that. Probably too much to ask right now, but maybe you can give me or give us a little bit about your experience with your short-term rentals. You mentioned Alki and property up north, which I assume is a short-term on the campground.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear about those.
Yeah, I used to own a lot of different things, and now I own long-term rentals and I own multi-unit short-term rentals. And the reason is because short-term rentals, although they can be very profitable, oftentimes are a little bit tougher to pencil, both in this current market with less vacation, less disposable income, less travel, and just higher expenses. So things like your utility bill that you're eating as a short-term rental operator, things like the materials you're putting in the rental, cleaners, a lot of the price of this stuff has gone up pretty significantly in the last 6 years, and the income for short-term rentals hasn't really gone up. In a lot of markets, it's gone down. So I think the biggest thing with short-term rentals is not just assuming that because it's a short-term rental, you're going to make money. Understanding that just like any investment, if you can increase density and increase income for your purchase price, you're going to do better. What I've found with short-term rentals is that as fun as it is to have a cute house in a good location or a singular cabin in the woods, it's a lot harder to make that property cash flow the way you want it to than it is to have a multi-unit, which outside of Seattle, right? Because in Seattle, we're limited to the number of short terms we can have, or a glamping site like I have with all this stuff here. The yurt's a good example. I spent 30 grand on the yurt. Guess how much in rent I get every year on my yurt? 40 grand. That's a pretty good ROI. Same with the tiny house. It was a little bit more expensive. I spent 100. on the tiny house. It ended up being cheaper than that because my tiny house from the first picture burnt down, and I convinced insurance that it was worth $100,000 because of inflation. And they paid me $100,000, so I had a builder in Canada build me a sweet new tiny house that is so much nicer. And that rents also for about 40. The funny thing is that the house on the property doesn't actually look like this. It's just what ChatGPT thinks it looks like. The house on the property rents for like 48 to 50 grand. And that house cost me 550,000 plus rehab budget, right? So you can see that 550 plus rehab budget, if it was just that house, it would be kind of a rough investment. But if I can spend 40 to get another, or spend 30 to get another 40, and then spend 100 to get another 40, like it starts looking a lot more positive. Way back, yeah.
Could you just touch on the viability of cash flowing with the prices in Seattle right now?
Yeah.
Or if you should plan on that happening further down the line?
Yeah, it's really tough. Like, no sugarcoating it. There's an affordability crisis in Seattle and then also in our country. And it's not just rental property investors that are struggling to cash flow. It's people everywhere that are struggling to make homeownership pencil. There's no sugarcoating that. It's pretty rough. I think the opportunities that are available to you as an investor are a little bit wider than the opportunities available to regular homeowners. I always say in our market that deals are made, not found. And I think that's particularly true now. You need to figure out the opportunities to improve the financial situation of the property, playing to your strengths, whether it's renovating the home or managing the home or short-term rentals. Because if you run analysis on 100 properties, there's a relatively high probability that 99 or even 100 of them won't cash flow, particularly at 5% down. Right, I'm talking to the house hackers here. You get 20, 25%. It looks a little bit more favorable for a lot of properties, but 5% down is a tough hurdle to overcome. So I would say that my initial scrappy house hack, where I did a $40,000 renovation, or probably a $150,000 renovation for 40, that works in any market, right? So being willing to get your hands dirty is super valuable. The cash cows, too, I think are getting overlooked in this market, particularly now because interest rates are really high. So if you have to get creative with funding, if you have to like do high down payment or like pull funds from another source or like do some kind of odd loan product that results in a higher interest rate, the spread between that higher interest rate and conventional 6% might not be as large as the spread between that higher interest rate and conventional 3%. So I think looking at properties that are difficult to finance or that you can't like max out your like equity position on is pretty wise when we have higher interest rates. Yeah. I wish I had a better answer for you though. Like it's no sugarcoating it. A lot of us in the business think that we're just going to be in a long period of unwinding where things slowly get better. Affordability slowly gets better. Rent to purchase ratios slowly get better. And eventually things will look a little bit more appealing for investors and home buyers. But I know we're not there yet. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the condo lot versus the subdivision? So
Yeah.
why would you choose one or the other? And if you're in this position of that, but you just want to do one DADU, maybe two, is there a route you could go where you only condo-wise and still achieve some financing, assuming long-term you may also want to reside in one of those?
Yes. Okay, good question. So the question was around condoing versus subdividing and just kind of how do you split these things out? It used to be that we condoed everything because there wasn't really a path forward in infill, right? Small lots that are not able to be short platted, as in like legally split into two lots. Now there's a lot more options to split lots. That said, most people are still doing condoization for a couple of reasons. It's generally cheaper from like a utility standpoint to just use the utility connection of the main house. Our market's kind of used to condoization, so buyers are okay with the HOA for the most part and okay with shared water, sewer, garbage, which is one of the big downsides of the condo process, is that not all the utilities are separate. They're okay with it for the most part. So that's still like the clearest path forward. the jury is a little bit out on specifically the value of not condoizing, because we haven't seen that many projects come to market that go a different route. But we know that the cost of alternatives to condoizing, both from like a time perspective and a money perspective, is higher, right? So most people still condoize because it's faster and cheaper.
And sorry, can you still get the financing, or
Yes,
the financing with just condoizing, so there's not a requirement to subdivide?
Correct, yeah. Although you don't have two legal parcels when you condoize, you do have two tax ID numbers that can be used for two different loans and two different ownerships and everything else. So all your options are still available to you. There's some nuance to that, but you can finance both of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Stella.
Hey, Stella.
Hi. So I want to talk about the reality. If you still remember, I know that building phase is the hardest phase.
Yeah.
So when you first started, what sacrifices did you make, like less socializing, decided to travel?
Yeah.
And how long does it take for you to own your first 3 properties?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wanted to save time for questions, and a lot of you have heard my story in some way, shape, or form already, so I didn't go too deep into the weeds. Me and my wife coined a term. It's called a death march. And what a death march is when you have a deadline. Usually it's self-imposed, like you've signed a lease with a tenant and they move in 4 days from now, and you have a lot of stuff to do and no money to pay anyone else to do it. So we did a lot of death marches where like we would just paint until 2 a.m. because that was what needed to get done. We also rescued a lot of contractors, right? Like a lot of times we actually did pay someone to do it and they didn't do it right or they didn't do it on time, and me and my wife Jess had to jump in. The reality is that death marches are only viable during certain stages in your life. So it's not a good opportunity for everyone. But me and my wife, when we were building, we didn't have kids. We now have 3. We didn't have as demanding jobs as we have now. I became a real estate agent after my 3rd rental. So those first 3, my house hack, my short-term rental, and my development pay, we're all just, me in the same shoes that you are, working with agents and wholesalers directly. But our superpower was hands-on time involvement on the property. So that's not necessarily the only route to build your first 3, but for us, we were putting the sweat equity into those properties. So I think it helps to have partners, either like friend partners or like spouse partners alongside you. Because for us, it was a sacrifice, but it wasn't like miserable. It wasn't like I was in a rental unit with my paint sprayer mask on at 2 a.m. like totally alone. Like I was with my best friend the whole time. And that's why a lot of these situations, a lot of the investors that I see that are really successful, they've either made like friend partnerships with other investors or like spousal partnerships with other investors, because it is a lot easier to have someone helping you through this. The other thing that we did is that we didn't spend a lot of money because we spent most of our time doing stuff. So there's a little side benefit to that. Like if you're putting energy into your rentals and into your real estate, you're probably going out to eat less, you're spending a little bit less income. I'd say the trick, and the reason why I don't just talk about hustle grind and I also talk about that like millionaire list, is the trick is knowing when to turn the switch, right? Like no one actually wants you for the rest of your life in rentals at 2 a.m. painting walls, right? Like that's not the life that I dream of for anyone in this room. But you may have to do it a little bit. And I think self-awareness about where you're going and how to get there is how you decide, hey, I can let this go now. So we let it go. We don't do that anymore. But that's how we got started.
How many years until the 3rd property?
We did 3 properties in 3 years. It is harder to do 1 a year now because things cash flow less. But 1 a year is, I think, the dream for a lot of people. 1 every 3 years is still awesome. 1 every 4 years is still awesome, right? Like whatever pace you can do is awesome. I think the trick is being consistent, right? Yeah, good question. Yeah.
So the DADUs are given the recent change in affordability and increased interest in this. Are you seeing more, is it kind of a build and hold type situation now, where people are doing the land and they're flipping them?
Yeah, most people are flipping them. And I think there's 3 reasons why they're doing that. One is that rental properties have come out of style a little bit. At lower interest rates, it was like pretty cool to own rentals. Cities have since passed more stringent landlord laws. Interest rates have gone up. There's been a lot of backlash against landlords. Lanyards. So it's a little less cool to own rental properties now. I still think it's cool, but I think a lot of things are cool. So that's one. The holding costs are just a lot higher. So when you compare like money in my pocket now on a flip versus the cash flow or the lack of cash flow you'd get, it looks less compelling now than it used to be. And unfortunately, they're doing what they were designed to do. And I say unfortunately a little tongue in cheek. They are not appreciating in value, right? So the fact that we're building all these small houses, they are actually generally the same price or even potentially lower price than they were in 2020 and 2019 and 2021 when we started building DADUs. And that's by design. So if you're bummed out about the lack of appreciation in DADUs, like, I'm sorry, but the whole point of them was to make housing affordable. So it's doing that. But as a real estate investor, if you're not seeing much appreciation, it makes it harder to justify the hold. So although I'm huge on rental properties, I'm not going to tell everyone to hold all of their DADUs. I think there is really a really good argument for flipping them. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. Question on like finding good contractor partners. What's somebody that's maybe not wanting to do the sweat equity themselves? How do you go about finding good contractors, building partnerships like that?
Do you know anyone, David?
I know a couple.
Okay, could you text me their numbers?
I don't know if they're good yet.
Yeah. That pretty much. Like I've gotten contractors a lot of ways, and the best way that I've gotten them is referral. If they're really good and cheap, sometimes people don't want to share them, is the other problem, right? Like they'll share their second favorite guy, not their first favorite guy. Which is funny if you're an awesome contractor, like that kind of sucks for your business. I'm sorry, man. Then like you're too good, so you're not getting the free marketing. There's 2 huge bottlenecks in our region. It's contractor availability and it's deal availability, right? Like appreciation is great. Financing opportunities are relatively good. Our market is relatively healthy. Like we don't see that many foreclosures. We don't see a lot of distress in our market. Homeowners are sitting on like an insane 50% plus equity on average. Like we're pretty crash resistant in Seattle, but it's expensive to live here. And the kind of people that want to swing a hammer oftentimes don't live in expensive markets. And the kind of people that swing a hammer and want to swing a hammer, a lot of them, like the generation that's coming up, like I'm not seeing a ton of people that want to get into the trades and that want to be contractors. And unfortunately, it's just like a little bit of a shift in like the narrative culturally about what it means to turn 16 and 18 and 21 and start a life on your own, that like being a plumber is not like one of the top choices for a lot of people. But the reality is that I know a lot of plumbers that clear 300 grand profit a year, and it's just them and like their spouse or their dog picking up the phone. Because let's be honest, you'll call the plumber 3 times, and even if they don't return your calls, when they call you back, you'll be like, oh man, thanks for calling me. Like I got a job. Like all of the power is in the contractor's court. So I'm hoping that changes. I'd say one of the biggest risks is that I've lost a lot of money to bad contractors. I know a lot of other people have lost money to bad contractors, and because there's such a shortage of contractors, bad ones are allowed to exist. So ask around, check their bond, hit up a lawyer friend or hit up an agent that works with contractors to get like the paperwork. Things like lien releases are super important to protect yourself, because it's already expensive to renovate a project if the contractor actually does what they say they do. And if they take the money and don't, like that's doubly expensive. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. I do have a Google Photos folder of thousands of pictures of trucks, because anytime I see a truck anywhere that like has a contractor, on it. Ideally, it's like pretty beat up. I don't want the one that's like freshly wrapped. That's like, oh, I just got into the business. One of the contractors that stole money from me showed up in a Mercedes with the lumber strapped to the roof rack. In retrospect, that was a red flag. I don't know a single contractor that I was young and naive. But like constantly, to my point, like constantly being on the lookout and being aware that it's one of the choke points in our market, and not expecting that you're just going to find one contractor and he's going to be your guy and your buddy for like your entire career. Like it's a constant struggle. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
We'll see you guys next month. First Thursday of the month, we have our next happy hour. Cheers. And of course, we have Kara at Origin Point, our lender. So you guys have probably seen rates steady. She's going to talk a little bit about what she's seeing. If you're in the market buying or selling, it's really interesting to see what's happening with rates right now because they are looking a little better than they have in the past.
Yes, today was another good day for improvement, but we've really stayed stable. If you look at the national rate average, it's around like 6.1, 6.2%, which means that just gives you a trend. Obviously, if you're doing a unique program or purchasing an investment property, that's not the rate necessarily you'll get just because it does fluctuate with things. But if you watch that trend, it's good to know where rates are across the board. And what I'm finding is a lot more home buyers are feeling more confident that we're not going to see the waves and they can rely on the rate that they get pre-approved for to be in line, hopefully lower, when they go to lock their rate. Also, lots of questions about refinancing. If you look at the news, if you look at advertisements, people are promoting it all the time. It does make sense in some scenarios, but I just encourage everyone to look at what costs are involved because while 5.75 sounds amazing, it's not amazing if you're paying $15,000 for it. So be aware of cost to rate ratio.
Yeah, I just did a DSCR refinance with Kara. The way I'm thinking about my refinances right now is that I'm going to try and stair step my rates down into a lower point. I'm not expecting, like I did during the COVID era, to like lock in my Goldilocks loan and ride it all the way through the 30-year mark. I'm expecting to lock something in for, usually for me, 3 to 5 years. If you like refinances and taxes and paperwork, maybe 2 to 4 years. I don't. But I'm going to lock it in and I'm going to watch it and I'm going to kind of stair step my way down, pulling out equity probably during the whole process until I'm at a point where maybe I do ride it out for 30 years. It's a different market than it used to be.
That's why the fees don't necessarily make sense now.
Exactly. If you're at 3%, pay those points, right? You're not going to want to get rid of that loan for a long time. If you're at 6%, you probably want to look at, if you tell your lender you want a no fee refinance, that means that they'll essentially charge you a higher rate, and in exchange, you won't have to pay as many closing costs and fees. That's probably what I'd recommend in this market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So reach out if you have any questions.
Cool. All right.